I wasn't actually planning on shooting a video today, but with the new Vecna content we just got on D&D Beyond, I felt that I had no choice because there is something very interesting going on with not only this content as a whole, but also with the Vecna stat block that we're getting here. D&D Beyond and Wizards of the Coast are sort of banking on this Stranger Things hype that is right now. No spoilers, or mild spoilers only. Vecna is referenced, let's say, in Stranger Things, the new season, which is on Netflix, and it seems that they are in a collaboration with Wizards of the Coast, where I believe some Stranger Things actors are gonna play a sort of short adventure, perhaps even the adventure that we are getting here. Because what we're getting is a free adventure and stat block for Vecna, and this is all on D&D Beyond, and it will be free for a limited period. Now there's a lot of lore about Vecna, who he is, his eye, his hand, all that stuff. Very shortly, Vecna is a very powerful lich, an undead wizard, and he's been involved in Dungeons & Dragons lore since almost the beginning, and he's always been this very frightful, dangerous character, someone you really don't want to run into, especially not if you don't have, for example, this sort of cast or something else that can destroy him. Putting the lore aside, what I'm really interested in is the stat block that we're getting for Vecna, because there is some very interesting stuff going on with it. First, Vecna the Archlich, if we just look at his base stats, we get a challenge rating 26 monster. That's pretty high. Proficient bonus of 8, we have 272 hit points and an AC of 18. Now, if you've faced off with high-level monsters before, or challenge rating 20 plus monsters, 18 AC and 272 hit points is actually quite low. He also only has a speed of 30 feet and no flying speed, which makes him very immobile, at least going from his base stats. One thing that really irks me about Vecna is that his wisdom is higher than his intelligence, which is sort of weird when you're this all-powerful lich. And I'm also maybe a bit disappointed with his constitution score. It could be higher and would help out with those hit points. But the 3 saving throws that he does get, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, is of course quite high because of that +8 proficiency bonus. He's also immune and resistant to a lot of damage, especially bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks is notable, but probably not too relevant, because if you have 20 level characters, they are very, very likely to have a magical weapon if they rely on weapon attacks to deal damage. As liches are supposed to be, he's also immune to charmed, exhaustion, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, stunned. He has true sight, which is very beneficial, obviously, and he has a quite high perception score, making him difficult to stealth against. That also results in a passive perception of 25, which may make it possible for a high-level rogue to fail on their stealth check against him, although they are likely to still succeed. Now, moving on to his traits, we have 5 legendary resistances, which is around the highest I think we are ever going to get. There may be 1 or 2 creatures that have more than 5 legendary resistances, but I believe this is at the very top. Then we have an Undying feature, which basically just has Vecna coming back in 1d 100 years if it dies, not really relevant in combat, unusual in nature, not relevant in combat, and a brief description of his dagger, which is just a +2 dagger for everyone else. So the only thing we really need to know here in actuality is the legendary resistance part. Everything else is, well, you can ignore that. Now, when we head into his stat block, you should note that he has a multi-attack that allows him to do basically one of his actions, spellcasting Rotten Fate, Flight of the Damned, and then make 2 attacks with his dagger. The dagger itself is at high level. If you have a 20 level party, a dagger that deals 7 damage plus 9 damage, so that's 16 damage on average, and then another 9 on your next turn, it's just negligible. It's not going to do a whole lot. 25 damage, even 2 strikes, that's 50 damage maybe on average, and you have of course a chance to keep taking necrotic damage, but still it's not going to do a whole lot. And that's if he hits you. +13 to hit is obviously a lot, but at high levels characters have plenty of ways to avoid being hit, including high AC, shield spells, all that stuff. So not too impressive, and I think it's also a bit weird that we have a lich that's striking you with a dagger. Sort of would make more sense that he would use spells, but and I'm not sure Afterthought is a canonical item. Maybe it's something that has always been there in Vecna's arsenal, but I don't remember reading about it before. Oh yeah, and it's important to note that this dagger will also prevent someone who's struck by it and afflicted by it from regaining hit points, at least until they save against the effect and stop taking damage from the dagger. Next up, he has Flight of the Damned, which is basically just a breath attack that targets Constitution, and it deals not a big amount of damage at this level. In fact, it's a quite small amount of damage, and it can frighten creatures. So that's sort of where you're doing a Constitution saving throw against being frightened, which is sort of weird. But yeah, that's how they've written it. Then he has Rotten Fate, which is where he causes a single creature to take a lot of necrotic damage, and if they die, they come back as a zombie. So this is basically a Finger of Death, but with a lot higher damage on it than the regular Finger of Death. Of course, Vecna also has spellcasting, because he wouldn't be a lich if he didn't, at least in my opinion. Notable spells we get here are Animate Dead as an action. That's quite fun. He gets Lightning Bolt at will, Fly at will, Dispel Magic at will, and he can also use Dimension Door twice, Invisibility twice, and Dominate Monster, Global Vulnerability, and Plane Shift, so he'll be able to get away if the situation turns bad for him. Now, the spell list is pretty lackluster when you consider that you have this all-powerful Archlich, and I'm all for not putting too many spells on the spell list, because you're not going to use all those spells, but I'm not very impressed with the spells that he's getting. Dominate Monster is obviously good. Lightning Bolt is only very, very rarely going to be better than Rotten Fate or Flight of the Damned, and beyond that, sure, he can cast Flyer himself, which he'll probably need. He can cast Invisibility if he needs it. Globe of Invulnerability can help him against spellcasters, but all in all, it's not a very impressive spell list. Moving on, we get to the bonus action, which is where it gets really interesting, because Vecna gets something called Vile Teleport. Now, I'll admit, when I first read this Statblock, I was like, oh, this guy is just gonna die in 2-3 turns maybe against a high-level party, maybe 1 turn. But then you read that he has this teleport. A teleport, you think, okay, 30 feet, that's not a whole lot. But when he lands, he can deal 10 psychic damage, no saving throw, to any creature within 15 feet. And if just one creature takes his damage, he regains 80 hit points. This is a really weird thing, where to get the healing that he'll probably need, 80 hit points per turn, he needs to use his teleportation. So how those two are linked, how that really makes sense, I don't know. But it does give you a dynamic where Vecna can use his mobility bonus action to get around on the battlefield, but he'll usually want to stay close to someone, an enemy, because in that way he can regain hit points. Now, you could of course have Vecna conjure up a zombie and have that zombie move around and then teleport after it and just deal damage to his own zombie to gain those hit points so you can stay away from the party. But in most cases you get sort of a dynamic where Vecna can get away, but he'll want to stay close and regain hit points. Is that fun? I think it is, but it's also quite weird. It's a weird feature that I can't really make sense of in my head, but it may achieve the goal of making him more dynamic, and of course a lot more difficult, because he does get 80 hit points every turn he gets to use this bonus action teleport. And now we get to the reactions, which is where it gets really interesting, because Vecna has something that is nearly unique. There are a few creatures that get this as well, but Vecna is one of a very select few that gets to take more than one reaction per turn. You get it on the Merilith, a demon as well, and there are a few other creatures that get these multiple reactions, but it's not something we see very often. And in this case, it feels a lot like it's instead of legendary actions, which you would assume a legendary creature such as Vecna would have. So instead of getting 3-5 legendary actions, they have given Vecna 3 reactions per round, but only 1 per turn. And these reactions are really good. He gets Dread Counterspell, which is basically a counterspell that deals psychic damage as well. And then he has Fell Rebuke, which is just a Hellish Rebuke sort of thing, but no saving throw. And then he can teleport away afterwards, so he gets some mobility as well. This will make him very evasive, and against a party of 3 to 4 characters, he'll probably get to use it once against each character, which is counterspelling the cleric spell, counterspelling the wizard spell, and then teleporting away from the barbarian or the rogue or whatever have you. So that's really useful. It's something that that makes him a lot tougher. Is it better than the legendary actions you could have given him? I'm not sure, because it's not every turn he'll get to use these reactions, and it's not every turn that this will be that good. teleporting 30 feet away, dealing 10 damage, it's not always going to matter a whole lot because the rogue is just going to run 30 feet towards you again and then hit you once more. So did that really matter that you did that? I can see why Wizards of the Coast or the designers of Vecna did this, and it's probably because they want him to have counterspell. He's a arch-lich, so it makes sense that he has it. But you get this weird thing if you have legendary actions and reactions where it feels like a whole lot to get to both counterspell you and then take a legendary action in a character's turn, and it can also become difficult for the DM to sort of keep track of both legendary actions and reactions, which are very similar but not quite so. I don't know if I'm necessarily a fan of this concept, but I think it is interesting that they're moving that way because reactions have been very sacred for a long time, and for some creatures I think taking multiple reactions is a way to sort of make them more viable against a party of characters. I do think Vecna should have some legendary actions, and I don't think I would be too bothered if he had both a Dread counterspell reaction and then some legendary actions. So my gripes with this stat block is that we have a not very fun or dynamic or sensible melee dagger attack on our Archlich. I'm not a huge fan of that. And then that the dagger uses Constitution, the Flight of the Damned uses Constitution, the Rotten Fate targets Constitution as well. So basically all of his core attacks, his 3 main actions, target Constitution, and they all also deal necrotic damage. So you have a character, Vecna, which deals necrotic damage and targets Constitution. For his other abilities, he deals psychic damage mostly. There's a bit more necrotic damage down here. I like that he deals some psychic damage, but there's no save here, so it's not like it's just 10 damage. Of course, it's going to hurt. Not a lot of creatures are resistant or immune to psychic damage, so he will be able to deal some damage, but still, he mainly relies on Constitution and necrotic damage. And then, of course, he has a few spells that will target Wisdom or Dexterity, such as Dominate Monster and Lightning Bolt. But these are not... Well, in Dominate Monster's case, he can't spam it, and in Lightning Bolt case, he can spam it, but it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. I run a game for a party of 16 characters, and the Paladin there, who has proficiency Constitution, he has his Paladin aura. He's also resistant to necrotic damage, or he could just drink a potion to become resistant to necrotic damage. He's not gonna feel anything that Vecna can do. He's gonna probably succeed on 9 out of 10 of these Constitution saving throws, and he's gonna take half damage from necrotic damage, making Vecna, well, basically not able to touch him or really affect him that much. And I think that's the sort of singular design that I'm not a huge fan of, because if you have that one character that operates in this specific way or has this specific save or this specific resistance, Vecna just becomes half as dangerous. Just like if you have a character that doesn't have a magical weapon, Vecna is 10 times harder than he otherwise would be. It's sort of, it's a swingy monster design that I'm not a huge fan of. I also see Vecna here as being extremely tough on spellcasters, 5 legendary resistances, a counterspell 3 times per round, making him not that fun for a spellcaster to face. And while I believe and agree that spellcasters usually fare better than melee characters in most cases, it's not very fun to head into a boss combat knowing that, all right, my wizard is just gonna suck in this encounter because I'll get counterspelled every time I try to cast a spell, and even if my spell goes through, this guy just has legendary resistance, so that's just ugh. I also think that the challenge rating of 26 is probably a bit too high. Now, I haven't playtested Vecna yet. I'm interested to try that. I'm interested to see if anyone puts their party up against him, how he fares. But if I pitted a party of 4 20 level characters against Vecna, even with a 80 hit points per turn healing he can give himself, he's still probably only around that 350, 430, maybe 500 hit points, assuming that he gets to do this 3 times before he dies. And I know that a 20 level paladin is going to do 100 to 150 damage each turn. A high level wizard is going to do damage if they get to cast their spells. I accept that Dread counterspell is going to make that a bit more difficult. But all in all, I'm not seeing Vecna really surviving that long, especially with a move speed of 30 feet. And of course, he can cast fly, but that's concentration. Then he's not concentrating on anything else, and it can't be dispelled. So we can actually compare Vecna with Zariel, Archduke of Avernus, a stat block we got back in Baldur's Gate, Descendant to Avernus, spoilers, which has an AC of 21, 550 hit points, innate flying speed. It also has resistances, immunities, stuff like that. It only has 3 legendary resistances, so Vecna got her beat there, but it deals a whole lot more damage with its... it has 2 of these flail attacks that deal 53 damage, if I'm counting correctly, and it also gets legendary actions, which includes a teleport, which is good, of course, and then there's Combust. Now, I will admit that Combust is not a very good legendary action, but there is something to be said for having teleport 3 times per turn, which will allow her to move 120 feet away, making her incredibly evasive. She also has magic resistance. She also gets regeneration, and then of course she also has a Finger of Death 3 times per day. She has blade barrier, stuff like that. She also gets to attack both with her flail twice and then use either Metataloc, whatever, and Horrid Touch. So in comparison, I'd say that Archduke Zariel of Avernus is a much more sturdy opponent. She's gonna last a lot longer than Vecna, I believe. She's much more mobile, and she may not have that Finger of Death single touch thing, and she may not be as frustrating with multiple counter spells and Fell Rebuke and stuff like that, but she is a lot more mobile, she deals a lot more damage, and she has a lot more hit points and AC. So in comparison, I'd say that Vecna is probably not nearly as tough as Zariel, Archduke of Avernus. One thing it's worth mentioning about Vecna is that they do tell us that we can put the Book of Wild Darkness on Vecna, but the Book of Wild Darkness is maybe not exactly going to do a whole lot. You can do Mask of Darkness, something like that. You can cast a few spells with it, maybe Dominate Monster spell, and then you get a major beneficial property, some minor beneficial properties from the artifact list, but these are generally not super powerful, so I don't see the Book of Wild Darkness making Vecna a whole lot stronger. Perhaps some stronger, a bit stronger, but not incredibly much stronger. Oh yeah, one thing we should mention is that we also get an adventure with this on D&D Beyond, and in this adventure we are told that Vecna also has lair actions he can use, or we can give him lair actions to make him tougher. Lair actions are something that many legendary creatures has, so I think that's fair. And he can summon a shadow per character that is basically in his lair, it seems. And he can cast Innovation, which will deal some more necrotic damage. And he can also deal some cold damage based on Wisdom saving throw and reduced movement speed. Obviously, giving him these lair actions is going to make him a lot tougher, even though a shadow is probably not going to do much against 20th level characters. Innovation isn't a very powerful spell, and he'll only get to use it probably once because it ends on initiative count 20 next turn. Mournful Dead is just some cold damage and a speed reduction, so that's fine as well. I'm not seeing these lair actions making a huge difference, but they will of course make him tougher and a more suitable opponent for 20 level characters. I still believe a 20 level character party is gonna make short work of Vecna. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Vecna and the adventure that we're getting here. Do you think that Vecna is how you envisioned he would be? Do you think he'll be fun to play against, or have you even tried pitting your characters against him already and seen what he can actually do in combat? I'm very interested to hear that. And if you have any thoughts on the new sort of mini mechanics we're getting, multiple reactions, healing on teleport, if you can call that a mechanic, stuff like that. So yeah, any comments, thoughts, critiques, let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video and like what you do here on the channel, please like and subscribe. It helps out a whole lot. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.